plans to fulfill the order of Bhaktisiddhanta to preach in the West. He started with newspapers. He backed the Godhead magazine, which was just stapled together or stitched together, and he would sell in Delhi, get the money from that sale, and then go back to Vrindavan and write and so on. Just did that for quite some time. But meanwhile, he was preparing books. The printer in Delhi said, "Why are you printing these small throwaway things? People will just throw them away. Print something that you won't throw away. Print hardcover books." So Prabhupada expressed later, he took that to heart. And so he began the project of translating Srimad Bhagavatam. But he also had a manuscript for Bhagavad Gita. Then he was planning, when he came to the West, to have it printed in the West, because that was his audience. So the quality of printing in the West would be better. And he wanted to satisfy the audience. So he brought the manuscript. Then he brought the first canto in 3 volumes, very famous part of Prabhupada's work. And then one evening, a crazy person, believe it or not, there's some crazy people in New York, a crazy person stole his manuscript before it was published. And they stole his typewriter. Like, not electric typewriter, not a computer, just like a little manual, boop, 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 that kind of very primitive typewriter. They stole it. What's somebody going to do with a stolen Bhagavad Gita manuscript? Nothing. So he had to do one all over again. So he did that in America, but before he did that in America, he wanted to lecture from Bhagavad Gita, so he had the devotees buy a translation of Bhagavad Gita from a store. So we could have the Sanskrit. And it was one of those translations done by an impersonalist, because that's what was in bookstores. So Prabhupada said, just see what the author is doing. He was teaching us, so he was giving a class. Krishna says, maybe you know the verse, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja, which means abandon all varieties of dharma or religion and just surrender unto me. That's what Krishna says. Commentary. You should not surrender unto Krishna, but the unborn, unmanifest within Krishna. Prabhupada took his hand, made a fist, banged it on the table, and said, just see what he is doing. Krishna says, surrender unto me. Commentary, don't surrender to Krishna. Boom, just see what he is doing. And he said it again. Krishna says, surrender unto me. Commentary, don't surrender to Krishna. Rascal. Very strong language. I don't know what the word is in Russian, but I'm sure it's not a nice word.
Негодяй.
Rascal. Huh?
Негодяй.
Bad person. Rascal. So, therefore Prabhupada had to make another translation. And as he was working on the translation and commentary, one woman, American woman, asked, Swamiji, why are you working on another translation? There's so many, nearly 100 available in English today. And so Prabhupada put that in his foreword, that some woman asked me, and I had to say, there isn't one I would recommend. So I'm making one that I can recommend, because this is Bhagavad Gita as it is. And Bhagavad Gita as it is means Krishna says, surrender unto me, and the commentary says, surrender unto Krishna. Not something else. There's a rule in Sanskrit. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but I know this much. There are different meanings of words, as in any language. But there's a rule in Sanskrit you must take the direct meaning unless the direct meaning just doesn't make any sense. And then you can take a secondary meaning or a third meaning. But the rule is you must take the primary meaning. So when Krishna says surrender unto me, Bhagavad Gita as it is means surrender unto me. Surrender unto Krishna. Direct meaning. That's what Prabhupada meant by as it is. As opposed to some interpretation. So that's why Prabhupada wrote his second commentary on Bhagavad Gita as it is. And to write the commentary, he followed previous acharyas' commentaries. And two primary previous acharyas were used. One of them was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was a contemporary of just before Jagannath Das Babaji, in that period of time. Not so long ago. And then Baladev Vidyabhusan was his Shiksha disciple. And both lived in Vrindavan. Neither of them came from Vrindavan, but both went to live in Vrindavan. And Baladev's commentary, when you read in the dedication page, sometimes books have at the very beginning, just one page right here, dedicated to Baladev Vidyabhusan, because Prabhupada principally used his commentary. And Baladev Vidyabhusan, in addition to Bhagavad Gita commentary, he also wrote Vedanta Sutra commentary, which is a nice history. Some other evening we can talk about that one. But it was a very important writing. It was a time when Lord Chaitanya's followers in Jaipur, who were worshipping the deity of Govindaji. Have any of you been to Jaipur? Okay. Jaipur is the place where the deities of Vrindavan were taken by the king of Jaipur for safety when there were attacks on temples in Vrindavan. They broke temples. The Govindaji temple used to be 7 stories tall. And at that time, there weren't buildings 7 stories tall. That was like the Empire State Building or something. And big, heavy sandstone, heavy. How they got it up there is who knows. And Aurangzeb came and they started dismantling the temple. The story goes, he was traveling from Delhi to his place of residence in Agra, where the Taj Mahal is, that place. And he saw in the distance a lamp from the roof of the Govindaji temple, because it was this traditional road from Delhi to Agra. And he was very disturbed that he had to see a Hindu temple lamp, just to see it. So he ordered, when he got to his place, he ordered the soldiers to go and break the temple. So the soldiers came and started breaking the temple. And halfway through, they broke the top 4 floors or stories. And then there was some problem in Agra. The messenger came. They had to go help with the problem in Agra. And they didn't get to finish destroying the temple. But it was that kind of a hostile atmosphere. And so the king of Jaipur, also of Vaishnav, he had his soldiers come and carefully take the deities, put them on carts, and bring them for safety to Jaipur. So many of the original deities in Vrindavan are now, today, still being worshipped in Jaipur. And there's replacement deities in Vrindavan when we go to those temples. There's only a few that still have the original, like Radharaman Temple of Gopal Bhatta and some others. Because they're smaller. But the big ones were taken. So when the Govindaji deity was being worshipped by the descendants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in line, some conflict arose because there were a group of Sri Vaishnavas who were worshippers of Ramachandra who objected. Who are these Gaudiya people that are worshipping Govindaji? They don't have the credential. They don't even have a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, and etc., etc., etc. So they have to be in a according to rules of scripture, which we also follow, they also follow. They were saying you have to be in a bona fide disciplic succession for your initiation to be valid in order to worship the deity. And how can you have a bona fide disciplic succession without a commentary on Vedanta Sutra? Where's their commentary on Vedanta Sutra? The pujaris said, well, Lord Chaitanya said, Srimad Bhagavatam, that's the commentary on Vedanta Sutra. That's what we follow. Oh, come on, you have to have, your acharya has to make a commentary. So they went to the king, hey, these people shouldn't be worshipping, we should be worshipping the deity. And the king didn't know what to say. He wasn't a scholar. So he sent a messenger to Vrindavan and said, Baladev Vidyabhusan, one of the two commentators of Bhagavad Gita, help! Come spend some time in Jaipur and help me resolve this, because these people are complaining. And Baladev wasn't interested in that kind of controversy, so he instructed his disciple, Baladev Vidyabhusan, what elements need to be within Vedanta Sutra commentary. And he sent him to Jaipur. And a long conversation ensued between the complaining party and Baladev. And then he agreed to write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. And he did it sitting right in front of the deity, indicating, the story goes, he paid his obeisances motionless for 3 days, just praying to the deity for the spiritual empowerment to do this service. Then he sat up and started writing. And the commentary is called Govinda Bhashya. Bhashya means commentary. So the credit goes to Govinda, I just wrote it down, is what he was saying. So he was incredibly scholarly, and he also wrote a commentary on Bhagavad-Gita. And in Baladev Vidyabhusan's writings, as you'll find when you read the introduction to Bhagavad-Gita, Prabhupada's introduction, giving credit to Baladev. Baladev, for all of his writings, he taught in many, many writings that there are 5 essential truths. The Sanskrit word is tattva. 5 essential topics that you need to know in order to understand Bhagavad Gita. Or Bhagavad Gita explains these 5 topics, and by understanding these 5 topics, you can understand Bhagavad Gita. And so I thought I would give that little history and then mention what those 5 are, and a little bit about the 5, because it's all explained in the introduction. So we'll do it in English, and then we'll say the Sanskrit. Obviously the first one of them is God, and then another is the living entity, and then another is material nature, and then another is activity, and another is time. God, the living entity, material nature, material activity, and time. 5 topics. So the Sanskrit terms are Ishvara and Jiva, God and the living entity. Material nature is Prakriti. Activity is our friend Karma. and over here is time, or kala. So I'll just say a few things. Baladev explains, 4 of these are permanent, 1 is temporary. Want to guess the 1 is temporary? Huh? Karma. Karma. Because time is actually eternal. And time as it acts in this world has a beginning and an end. Like 1 second or 1 minute or whatever the measurements of time are. There's a whole chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Calculation of Time by the Atom, which is an amazing description of time. The conclusion is that actually time is eternal. But before it gets there, it says the smallest unit of time is the amount of time it takes for the sun to cross 1 atom. And that has a name for it. And then so many of those makes another one, and so many of those makes another one, and so many of those makes another one, and you add up those. That's like one of the terms is muhurta. And a muhurta lasts for some number of minutes. We know the word muhurta from Brahma muhurta, the early morning hours when it's ideal for spiritual activity. Brahma muhurta. And then so many muhurtas make of this, and so many of those make another thing, and then it just keeps going and going, and then there's the life of Brahma is 2 prarardhas, so it takes 2 of them to make his life, and then beyond that is eternal time. But actually, then the summary is actually time is eternal. It only appears to take on these other kinds of measurements because of how time is acting upon material nature. How time is acting upon material nature has to do with, some of you probably know, the glance of Mahavishnu that begins the process of creation. Anyone unfamiliar with that? The glance of Mahavishnu that begins the process of creation. Do you know who is Mahavishnu? You've heard of Mahavishnu?
The sustainer?
Yes. Yeah. That's right. So Vishnu, there's three aspects of Vishnu. One is the one that creates the universes. So that's the description goes like this. There's periodic creation, maintenance, and then dissolution, and then resting. Cyclical time. Then creation again, and maintenance for some time, dissolution, resting for some time, and so forth. So during that period of resting, the living entities, the jivas, are within the body of Mahavishnu. So right now there's 2 of the 5 topics. There's God and the living entities. So the sum total of all the living entities that are in the material atmosphere are within the body of Mahavishnu. And he's enjoying pastimes with his internal potency. So just as Krishna has his internal potency and her name is Radha, or Narayana has his internal potency and her name is Lakshmi, Lakshmi Narayana, or Sita Ram. So this one's name is Rama. So Mahavishnu is enjoying pastimes with Rama, while the living entities are within the body of Mahavishnu during that dormant period. And time is eternal, so there's living entities, time, and God. Then there's the reflection of his internal potency. And that's the material nature. The word, one of the terms is pradhan, or her name is Chaya Devi. Just like, here's an apple, here's a mirror, and there's a reflection of the apple in the mirror. So the reflection of the apple is not the apple, but its existence is based upon the apple. It's just a reflection of the apple. So Chaya Devi, or material nature, is a reflection of the internal potency of Mahavishnu. Her existence is dependent upon the internal potency's existence. She's an expansion, or the language of Brahma Samhita, she's a maidservant. So Mahavishnu sees this dormant material energy, Jaya Devi, knowing that she wants something to do. She wants some service. In a compassionate gesture, he wishes to give her some service. He knows she wants to do something. So he glances. That's all he does. The pinky, he just glances. And with his glance, the living entities that were within his body are carried by the glance. And something else is carried by the glance. Time. Time energy is subordinate to Ramadevi, and time energy then, with the living entities, contacts this dormant material nature. It's the original impregnation. So the living entities cast by the glance of Mahavishnu, impregnating material nature. And then it starts to be, instead of being dormant, it gets like, the egg of a fertilized egg of a mother then becomes agitated and starts to develop. So there's time. But then according to the karma of those living entities that were dormant in the body of Mahavishnu and now are within this material nature, they will have different factors of time operating in their life. Like, for example, here's 3 examples. Life in the heavenly planets, life here, and life of an insect, 3 different stages. According to the Vedas, time in the heavenly planets, one day in the heavenly planets is 6 months here. One night in the heavenly planets is another 6 months here. So 1 year passes here for every day in the heavenly planets. So while 1 year passes here, for an insect, Prabhupada would often speak about this, there's one insect in India, I forget the name, and its life cycle is 24 hours. So in the period of 1 day, the little baby insect is born, he grows. During the course of the day, he matures, there's some mating, and by the end of the night time, he's dead. So his one lifetime is 1 day for us. 1 year for us, 1 year for us is 1 day of the heavenly planets. So time is relative, is the point. You with me?
Uh-huh.
Time is relative. But it's actually eternal, but it's acting differently according to our karma. If we're due to get the body of an insect, it acts one way. If we get the body of a human, it acts another way. Get the body of a demigod, it acts another way. But actually it's eternal. So there's time, there's the living entities carried by the glance of Mahavishnu, but they're eternal. And material nature, it's also eternal. Sometimes it's unmanifest, sometimes it's manifest. Sometimes it's in the process of creation, sometimes in the process of destruction. That's just the modes of nature working. But material nature itself is eternal. And God is eternal, living entities are eternal. But the thing that's temporary is karma, activity. So a lot of the subject matter of Bhagavad Gita has to do with activity, how to do what you do in such a way it leads to liberation, or leads to no longer the cycle of birth and death. But for that to happen, then there has to be a change of consciousness. So there's a lot of discussion in Bhagavad Gita about transformation of consciousness. So that's our life as devotees, thinking about transformation of consciousness, so that we can experience eternal time with eternal life and eternal activity with the eternal abode of the Supreme Lord. But it requires a transformation of consciousness. And for that transformation of consciousness, it requires a number of things, but seeing with spiritual vision. And how do you see with spiritual vision if you're covered? You hear from Krishna how Krishna sees. The phrase that Prabhupada taught us was chakshusha. Chakshu means eyes. So jnana chaksha, seeing with the eyes of knowledge. Or shastra chakshusha, seeing with the eyes of scripture. Or seeing as Krishna sees. Not that you become Krishna, but you see as Krishna sees. This is how he sees things. And he's not conditioned like us. He's not covered with matter. He's in the eternally liberated position. Nitya Mukto. He's eternally liberated. We're now conditioned. So if we can see as Krishna sees, then we can see as a liberated person sees. That we can change our consciousness progressively just by the process of hearing. That's how Bhagavad Gita is to be received. Gita means song, because there's this statement in Brahma Samhita, the spiritual world is so nice. Wherever there's walking here, there it's dancing. Whenever there's speaking here, there it's singing. It's a very joyful place. So when Krishna's speaking, it's a song. So Bhagavad, spoken by Bhagavan, Krishna. Krishna's Song of God in English. Song of God, Bhagavad-Gita. Where he's, through sound vibration, he's transforming the consciousness of those who hear that message to the position where they can see as he sees. They can see with spiritual vision. And to rekindle or reawaken their spiritual consciousness so they can engage in spiritual activity. Very essential message from Bhagavad Gita is how to do your activities of life. Because we have the teaching of Bhagavad Gita is we have to do something. And as soon as we do something, there's bondage for that something. But you can't do nothing either, because you're a spirit soul, you're active. You're going to do something. And do something in material consciousness, you're in bondage, and you get another body, and you're just, cycle of birth and death. And you can't do nothing. So the action needs to be with higher consciousness, or the consciousness of the soul connected to the Supreme. So how to do that? That's the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Yoga, connecting the soul with the Supreme. The living jiva, connected to God by proper understanding of activity and proper use of time, and regarding material nature as the property of God. Some of you may have read, at least you've heard of Ishopanishad. It's another book that Prabhupada translated. The whole subject matter of Ishopanishad is about proprietorship. Who owns everything? The communists have one idea, the capitalists have another idea, the monarchs have another idea, the socialists have another idea, and Krishna has another idea. And the idea that is explained by Krishna and in Ishopanishad is everything belongs to God. Everything belongs to God because everything comes from God. So it's His. It's His energy. And if we see stuff, material nature, as coming from God and therefore the property of God and therefore to be used in service to God, then we can lead a liberated life, a karma-free life. But it requires a change of consciousness. And so the message of Bhagavad Gita, along with the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, these two are what Prabhupada calls two tracks on a train, just uses a metaphor. There's a train, at least the conventional trains, now they have monorails, but conventional trains have two tracks. Using that comparison, Prabhupada said that for spiritual life, you need these two tracks. One, something that cleanses the heart. And two, something that guides your life. So the chanting of Hare Krishna is for cleansing the heart, making the heart pure and free from contamination. But then we need to guide our activities properly, and that's where Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and our devotional teachings come. So we know what's right and wrong, what to do, what not to do, how to conduct our lives, how to work, how to interact socially, how to eat, how to do everything in accordance with the will of Krishna. If you have just one, so I think this is one of the reasons that Braj Mohan wants to have this Bhagavad Gita study. In addition to chanting, I presume most of you are chanting, and some are very fixed in your practices of chanting. So side by side with that chanting, which is meant to make the heart pure, now that the heart has become somewhat purified, hearing how to conduct the activities of your life, how to do the karma part, the work, in such a way as liberating instead of binding. That's Bhagavad Gita. Now I want to read, I'm almost done. I want to read 3 sentences from the introduction. I'm going to take a moment for me to find the reference. Okay. There it is. All this is just describing what Bhagavad Gita is and how it's being presented and so forth. Lord Krishna descends specifically to re-establish the real purpose of life when man forgets that purpose. Easy. Even then, out of many, many human beings who awaken, oh, that's the purpose of life. It makes sense. That's really the purpose of life. Out of very few are people who wake up like that. But of those who wake up like that, out of many, many human beings who awaken, there may be one who actually enters into the spirit of understanding his position. And for him, this Bhagavad Gita is spoken. That's it. So, Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's message to remind us of the purpose of life when we've forgotten the purpose of life. Okay, great. And so we're gathered together because we want to hear from Krishna. What is that? The purpose of life. And then out of some who get it, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is not sense gratification. The purpose of life is devotional service to Krishna, becoming once again to the position of seeing the happiness of the one who's already completely happy, and that's our happiness, and the happiness of love. That's the purpose of the human form of life. Doing the things that we do for the satisfaction of Krishna. That's the purpose. Okay, so that's great. I get the purpose. It's really nice. Out of those who awaken to that purpose, there may be one who actually enters the spirit of understanding his position. So that's the purpose, and then those that enter into what that purpose is, and it moves them. It conducts their life. They're situated in that relationship with Krishna, and nothing else. And that's Prabhupada's writing. That's for whom Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. So it's something like Acharya Nishta does book distribution as his service. He likes it very much. And finds it very satisfying, although there's always challenges with everything that we do. There's challenges with book distribution too. And I can say this from my experience in book distribution, and I'll compare it to some other things. Day after day after day, you meet so many people. I don't know, however many, hundreds of people every day. And the next day, hundreds of people, the next day, hundreds of people, the next day, hundreds of people. You have no idea who you're going to meet. It's a complete surprise. And there's the whole spectrum. Some people say, yay, and some people say, boo, and some people say, I don't know. And the whole spectrum of responses. So out of those people, at least, everyone is being given an opportunity. The Sankirtan devotee everyone gets an opportunity to get Krishna's message. Some people say yes, some people will say no. And of those people that say yes, somewhere out there in the course of the day, there's one, maybe two, maybe even three really, 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 really special souls. That's why you're on Sankirtan. It's for everybody, and even those that say no, and those that say yes, they may just put it on their shelf and not read it. And then, 10 years later, somebody will take it off the shelf and read it. And kaboom, something happens. But especially for those that are ready for whatever the combinations of things that have been going on in their life, they're ready. Wow, this is just what I was looking for. And they're people they're looking for. So we just have to go out and hand it to them because they're looking for it. And if we don't hand it to them, they'll find something else. Bhagavad Gita as it isn't. Or something. Don't surrender to Krishna, Bhagavad Gita. So it's very satisfying. Or let's say having Harinam Sankirtan. Sometimes we go to the public. We just did this festival, Rath Yatra festival. Many people heard the holy name. How many attended the Rath Yatra? Almost everybody. Very nice event. Next year try to go. There, on this side of the festival, there was a mantra meditation booth. On that side of the festival, there was a second mantra meditation booth. People they're coming off the beach in their, swimming paraphernalia, whatever it is, just going around the park and whatever it is. Hey, come on over and do mantra meditation. That kind of thing. 1,200 people chanted the Hare Krishna mantra, one full round, who had never done that before. I'll give you the number again, 1,200 people. 1,200 people, just at that mantra meditation booth. What to speak of other persons that heard the holy name, or received a book, or saw Lord Jagannath, or received the prasad of Lord Jagannath. Nice, huh? And out of all those people, some of the devotees were going around and handing out an invitation, if you're interested, on Tuesday evening, after the Sunday Rath Yatra, Tuesday evening, we're going to have a little something, introduction to Bhakti. 10 people came. Out of those, 1,200 people that chanted japa, and you get the idea. And maybe out of those 10 persons, one person will start associating with devotees regularly. But then all that other is unlimited mercy going out for everybody. Everybody's included, but especially for those persons that are the reason for Krishna's appearing to speak Bhagavad Gita, and the reason for Prabhupada's making his commentary in Bhagavad Gita. And hopefully, we're one of those people that get the, wish to know the purpose. We get it. It's to try to live our lives in such a way, to do our work and do our activity, and be with our friends and our family and everything we do in such a way that it's pleasing to Krishna. And then we know what, and then enter into the spirit of it. So when you take up Bhagavad Gita, remember those 2 sentences from the introduction, and if you sincere and you hear the systematic presentation of Bhagavad Gita, it will help you. It'll increase the likelihood of your being the recipient of that message of Bhagavad Gita that Krishna came and spoke for, so that you can enter into the spirit of the understanding of the real purpose of life, the reason for which Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. I like those 2 sentences very much. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so that's it. That's your little introduction. Any comments or questions? Yes.
I've got a question. You mentioned earlier, you gave an example of how there's three ways of, or there's the spiritual planets where the time is much longer compared to.
There's heavenly planets.
Yeah. The earthly planets.
Human species and lower life species, like insects.
You said insects, but what about like even lower than that, where it's hell supposedly, and you said that people only get to this point where they turn into insects if they live their life, committing bad things, accumulating bad karma.
Yeah.
So.
What's that all about? The hellish planets?
Yeah.
Where does that fit into the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I just said I was going to give 3 examples of time. Now here's how time works in the hellish planets. A flash is a lifetime, but it feels like a lifetime. Here's how it works. Sometimes people ask the question, when the soul passes on to the next body, how long does it take? And the answer is it's immediate. The soul leaves this body and goes to the next body. It's immediate. However, those souls that are destined to go to the lower species, they have another time factor going on, which is that soul plus the subtle body of that soul are taken by the agents of Yamaraj. Yamaraj, Lord of Death. Yama means death. Yamaraj is the king of death. So the sinful persons are taken by the agents of Yamaraj before the court of Yamaraj, and he has this capacity to know their good and their bad deeds, and he sends them to the appropriate hell. This is happening in a flash, but it feels like a lifetime. And so one goes to a particular hell that's described at the end of the 5th canto, if you want to check it out, last chapter, Canto 5. when one experiences enormous amount of suffering specific to the type of sinful activity that one has done. It may have been murder, it may have been alcohol, it may have been prostitution, it may have been stealing, it may have been whatever it was. And there's a planet, a place, a hellish planet, where suffering according to the sinful activity is the reaction for that is experienced. And the suffering lasts for a whole lifetime. But it's just a flash. But it feels like a whole lifetime. Like for us, the 1 year that passes feels like a year, and for the heavenly planets, it's a day and a night. But it feels, so it feels like a lifetime. And at the end of that, get me out of here, I'll take any existence, take the body of an insect, yes, the worm and stool, yes, let me out of here. Boom. So one experiences the punishment or the suffering for sinful activity, and then takes birth in one of these lower species, an animal or a bird or a fish or an insect or a tree or something. And then by karma being extinguished, by living as a tree or living as a whatever it is, karma stockpile is reduced, consciousness is lifted a little bit, and then one takes the next, through the evolutionary cycle, species of life. Lives for that full lifetime, and then that much karma is further reduced, consciousness is that much more uncovered, and then the next species of life, like that, up again to the human form of life, where we are, and now there's still contamination, but there's higher consciousness, and we can use it properly or not. Free will is operative. We can choose a variety of things because of that free will, because of higher consciousness. So that's where the hell picture fits in. It's a flash, but it feels like a lifetime.
I see. Well, what about these? It's mentioned in the book that there's like 400,000 different types of life forms.
400,000 human
life forms. So I mean, even beyond that, I mean, there's so many other different life forms. And supposedly, what if there are those highly intelligent life forms?
Like aliens or something?
Aliens, for example, yeah. But they are inclined to commit things. They don't, they don't believe in God. They want to do things their own way. They're technologically advanced, for example.
Well,
what is their purpose and why?
Okay.
Why are they in hell? I mean, I understand they're cut off from God. That's not their interest, I guess.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
So, but they're so advanced, and their life supposedly goes beyond. They're very strong.
The modern language is aliens. That's like the science fiction term, and the Bhagavad Gita term is demons, but it's the same set of people. That and the planets of the demons are described in the 5th canto. And they're highly technologically advanced, and they live a long lifetime, and they enjoy like anything, and then suddenly they die. They're not free from the perils of material existence, although they may seem to think we're invincible. They're not. They're invincible they're destroyed by time, and ultimately by the energy of God. So they wish for immortality, and they work towards that in an atheistic way. Then there's a place for them. There's a planets of the demons, as there's the planets of the godly. They live a long duration of life. They have opulence like anything, hundreds and thousands of times more opulent, more beauty, more wealth, and so forth. And then they're competing with each other. The divine and demoniac natures, since the beginning of creation, have been competing with each other, and sometimes they're within the same person. Sometimes they're two groups of persons which have their residences, and the struggle of good and evil. It's classic. It's part of creation. So your question was, what's their role in all of this? That was another part.
Yeah.
Like, not where do they stay only, but what's their role? Well, that's indicated in Bhagavad Gita, where when we speak of the living entities, that's one of the five, there's free will. The reason the living entity has free will is because living entity is part of the Supreme, who has unlimited free will. So we have that the spark has qualities like the fire. The drop of water has qualities like the reservoir of water. Living entity has qualities like God. He has free will, we have tiny free will. We can properly or improperly use it. So there's the opportunity to improperly use it. There's a place for those people. In Russia, it's Siberia. Unless you're from Siberia, then it's nice. Or the deserts of the Middle East, or some place where it's severe. But there's a place to go where it's severe. And now in these cases, these are people who are atheistic, but they wish to have opulence. So the reciprocation with Krishna is there. He supplies the intelligence how to get the opulence, how to do the technology thing and get the thing, thinking they're doing it without God, but they can't do it without God, and then it's all taken away. So someone that has some opulence and it's then taken away, how do they feel? Oof, really bad. The person that doesn't have it also feels bad, but they still have some hope that they'll get it, and they're striving to get it. The one who has it and loses it, it's very difficult. Anyway, the place is, the place in creation is, living entities have their choices of free will, and that's part of the spectrum of choices. And we could also choose, or just as an example from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of the worships of ghosts. So ghosts are real, and some people worship ghosts. Some people, following this whole thing with the Harry Potter book, there's a whole phenomena, not only in films and media, but young people that are learning as much as they can about witchcraft and black magic, and it's not absent in Russian-speaking parts of the world. There are people that know those things, and now it's becoming very popular. It's just another one of the options of free will. It's the mode of ignorance, and people attracted to that. People attracted to passion, building big cities. People attracted to goodness, living a life of charity and kindness and compassion. So there's in the mix. It's very colorful, the variety of things in this material world. It's just part of one of the options of the free will of the living entity. Divine, in broad categories, divine or godly, or in harmony with the will of God, and demoniac, those that are opposed to the will of God, and then varieties under both. That's where it comes into the picture. Anything else? Yeah.
One question about vegetarian. So we have like lot of people.
Which?
Vegetarian. Yes,
Okay.
because I'm Krishna's devotee, just like vegetarian.
Sure.
So I have a lot of friends in different countries who like try something, but if you try to explain about vegetarian, we have discussion. So I try to explain. So like Krishna is like God, and all around have like a soul. And people ask, okay, but what difference between like animal and, for example, grass? Because if you tell from my friends explain, if you tell me like animal have the soul and this crows have the soul, or like it's different between animal and grass. If you still eat some grass, some fruits,
Okay.
they have a soul.
Okay.
So how that description explains this?
It's really simple. Really simple. to keep it like, depends on how tricky the brain is of your friend. We'll give like a really simple one. When you take the apple from the apple tree, are you taking the life of the apple tree?
No.
No. When you take the tomato from the tomato plant, are you taking the life of the tomato plant? No. When you take the eggplant from the eggplant, are you taking the life of the eggplant? No.
Yeah, but these fruits have seeds.
Yes.
From example, if you don't eat it, say like you can put in the ears and you have like a
Good point.
few different
Okay.
plants.
Depends on the intelligence of the person that you're speaking to. And, you know, how tricky they are. So yes, that's true. So now, here's what I do with some people, depending on the person. Do you think it's okay, take the logic that you just spoke, then why not eat a human being? Because if you can eat an animal and eat grass or why not a human being? No, we can't do that. Well, tell me logically, why not? If the logic is, you know, what's the difference between taking the body of an animal and the body of a plant? Take the logic and extend it. What's the difference between that and taking the body? You know, you can't do that. Why? Why? Because we place some value in the human form of life. So why? Well, maybe because we're one of them. We have this same type of body. But from a Vedic perspective, because you're asking, you know, why is this okay and that's not okay? So this is like the second part. Yes, there's some life taken, but there's higher grades of life. And those that are in the higher grades of life, they experience greater suffering. The human being experiences, the animal certainly experiences suffering. Human being experiences greater suffering because of evolved consciousness. And there's less suffering in the lower forms of life. So if I can lead my life in such a way that there's less suffering for other living beings, is that a better way to live? Or it doesn't matter, since they're suffering anyways? We make some relative evaluations. That's not the final answer, but that's an ahimsa answer, a non-violence answer. We live our life in such a way we're producing the least amount of suffering for other living entities. So to take the apple from the apple tree is certainly different than chopping an animal. Although there's life within the apple seed, it's less culpable, there's less suffering and therefore less punishable. So it's better. That's just vegetarian versus non-vegetarian. Now here comes the third. And this is the transcendental principle. When we offer the apple to Krishna, the tree that produces the apple gets spiritual benefit and we get spiritual benefit by taking the apple that's been offered to Krishna. But we can't offer the chopped body of an animal to Krishna. He won't accept it. So the animal isn't benefited, we're not benefited, and Krishna is not pleased. So we live our life not just as vegetarian, non-vegetarian, we live our life as we offer everything first to Krishna. There's some things we just can't offer to Krishna. And so we don't. We take only those things that are first offered to Krishna. There's much more detail in that whole line of discussion, but it gives you the core principle. One is nonviolence. There's less violence in living the life of a vegetarian. It's a better way to lead your life. Then there's the transcendental principle. Largely, like let's say wheat. It's already turned brown. The soul has already left the wheat body, wheat plant. We take the wheat grain. So then the argument is, okay, within that wheat grain, there's life. There's a soul. can plant that and make another wheat thing. There's so much wheat produced, they're not all going to make more wheat plants. You know, it's meant for human consumption. It's meant for consumption. So the Vedas say jivo. Jiva means living entity. Jivo jivasya jivanam. One living entity is meant as food for another living entity. It says that's God's arrangement. And what's the arrangement of the living entities for us in this category? And by offering the apple to Krishna, or the milk from the cow, we're not taking the life of the cow, we're taking the milk from the cow and offering the milk to Krishna. The cow is getting benefit. We're getting benefit. And Krishna is being served and pleased. That's the principle that we like to live our life by. That's why we do what we do. I've been down that path probably 5,000 times or more. And you know, different people will respond in different ways with what I just said. But what can you do? You offer the explanation.
Thank you.
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you so much for the lecture, and I have a question regarding learning Bhagavad Gita.
Regarding which?
How
Learning.
to learn, how
Oh,
to learn
okay.
Bhagavad Gita.
From a teacher.
Like, it took me a very long time until I became able to read it. And then it started very very fast. I was reading it with high interest, and waiting another, because usually in this hectic life we're reading it in a train, in a bus, and so, and we're just trying to keep it next to us. And then I'm getting to the verse saying that we're not supposed to read Bhagavad Gita by ourselves, but it should be spoken by kind of guide and qualified person.
Yeah.
So, and we are reading by ourselves and sharing the opinions. So is it kind of offense?
No.
Because
Two things.
Okay.
One is, Prabhupada has given his Bhagavad Gita purports. So you're reading through his guidance. Second thing is, Brajamona is making an arrangement for someone to come and teach you Bhagavad Gita. So you'll have a teacher to hear from. But he's going to be only speaking what's in the purports. Or, according to his understanding and realization. So that's called the cyclic succession.
But there's a big risk we can misunderstand.
Sure. Therefore, have a teacher. Or if you're just reading on your own, when things come up, write them down and then ask. Real simple. And then you're not on your own, you're just doing it, in that particular way. Just like, you can enroll in a class at a high school or college or university, or you can take an online course and just send the homework questions in to the teacher grades them and sends them back. Yeah. As you're reading, we're not distributing books by the thousands to make people offensive. So they read the book without any guidance, and now they're committing an offense. So don't worry, you're not committing an offense. You're following the instruction to study carefully, and then when questions arise, you ask them. Ask Rich Mohan and his wife, and if they don't know the answer to the question, they're not going to pretend that they know. They'll say, well, we'll ask somebody who knows, and we'll get back to you. Then you're following that instruction under the guidance of. But the first part is very, very important. And that's, the purports. Something that Prabhupada didn't like, but he did it anyways. The first printing of Bhagavad Gita was by Macmillan, a very famous publishing company. It was prestigious that Macmillan agreed to be the publisher, but they cut it down. It was an abridged version. Some purports just got cut out. Some of them got shortened because they gave us a certain number of pages. So that's all we're going to do. And then we just stopped. We just printed our own. Without error. So, Okay.
I have another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like when I was reading, like especially the chapter 9 and 10, it like always repeating one idea that the purpose of our life is to understand the like I don't know how to say it in English, but the power and mysticism of Krishna.
Yeah.
And then like closer to end of the chapter 10, it says like the power of Maya is so like it's so powerful that even demigods like Shiva or like somebody else, they don't understand the power and mysticism of Krishna. They cannot
And
like
so you're thinking,
like if nobody can understand.
so here's the good news. Krishna is very kind. And if he sees that you're striving sincerely, then the internal potency can break through that limitation, and Krishna can disclose himself to you. Little you. Little me? Yes, little you. So in other words, the power of the demigods is insufficient, but the descending mercy of Krishna is sufficient. So, yes, I'm very tiny, number one. Number two, on my own strength, it's not going to be understandable. The power and the mysticism of Krishna will not be understandable by me. But number three, the descending mercy of Krishna, that's my hope. And that's what Rupa Goswami writes in his Nectar Devotion. He calls it hope against hope. Asha Bandha is the Sanskrit. Asha means desire. I'm strengthened by the hope that Krishna is very kind. And although I'm very tiny and unqualified, certainly not like those that are more qualified, I'm not qualified. And they can't, so I have to depend especially on mercy. I'm going to make my sincere effort, but Krishna! Like that. Hope against hope. Read the section. Look it up in Nectar Devotion. Chapter 10. Anyway, you find it. Hope against hope. Someone else, yes.
Krishna Maharaj, I have a question that is not quite
On top.
well, we weren't talking about this today, but I've heard from one of the spiritual masters, he said that brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis especially, if they commit to something, and if they, in parentheses, say fall eventually, they lose all the goodness that they have accumulated. Which makes me think it's incredibly risky to become one of those, because if you do something that you're not supposed to, let's sexual intercourse with a female, and you lose all the goodness that you collected. So basically the question is, in your next life, will you start from the place where you ended? That's what Bhagavad-Gita says. Or because you did this and you lost all your goodness, you basically might spend 50 years doing this, and then because of one action or several actions, you lose it completely. So where do you start next life? Thank you.
I don't know which spiritual master you heard this from, but it's the first time I've heard it. I can tell you what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Two things Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Svalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahatovaya. Alpa means very little. Even a very little advancement on this path will save one for the greatest type of danger. Trayate means to deliver. Mahabhaya means the greatest fear. The greatest fear is seeing the Yamadutas, the Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, and his agents. It means you're going down. So if you do go back to the example, someone who takes vows of renunciation and they break those vows of renunciation, that's sinful. It's not that all those volumes of devotional service they did just becomes zero, and all that's left is the sinful activity and the reaction to the sinful activity, and down they go with the agents of Yamaraj. That's not what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita.
So it says it sets you back, but it doesn't completely
Yes,
eliminate
it doesn't nullify everything. And there's another place in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, one of her favorite chapters, text number 30 and 31. You can look them up later. 30, Krishna says, supposing somebody does something really bad, like really, really bad, really, really bad, but their main characteristic is they're always engaged in my devotional service, but they do something really bad. I mean, not like bad, but really bad. That's in the Sanskrit. Such a person, Krishna says, I consider saintly. Read it, 9:30 Bhagavad Gita. Api chet sudarasharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadur eva. Sadhu, you know, saintly person. Sadhu eva samantavya. I consider that person to be sadhu. Why? Because their constant engagement in devotional service is their normal practice, and circumstance came and they got covered. Prabhupada gives this example. The tide. It comes in, but it stops there, and then it goes back out again. It stops there, it comes back in again. It stops there, and goes back out again. So the tide comes and the tide goes. So supposing one day there's a tidal wave or a tsunami. It doesn't stop. It just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, and everything gets covered in ocean water. Some time passes, it recedes, and it goes back to where the tide comes in, the tide comes out. Tide goes in, tide comes out. Similarly, that's Prabhupada's example or comparison. Supposing somebody is properly situated in devotional service, and circumstantially something happens, they just get completely covered. And then as soon as that circumstance is withdrawn, they again come back to the proper position. So the operative in that case, apichet sudarajaro, bhajate mam ananya bhak, undivided bhakti. That's their nature. So when that nature is there, Krishna considers them sadhu. The next verse he says, I correct the whole thing.